today we have a special guest. We're going to have laughs. There is going to be some swearing, just letting you know. But actually, we're going to talk about something that's really serious as well: kinship, special guardianship for our kids. So I would love to welcome the very funny, the very lovely, and the very talented Maura Jackson. Hello, how are you?
Hello, Ashley. I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Really good. I am so pleased to have you here. So, before I get you to introduce yourself, we've kind of known each other a little bit around the circuit, especially kind of speaking circuit. So, we're Manifest, I first seen you, and I remember it being a really crappy rainy day. I was in with our mutual friend, Catherine Sandland. We were both hungover from TEDx the night before and both had to come on and do a talk. And we thought, right, let's just get ourselves a little bit of something bubbly. Went in, sat in this outside tent, and we were like, oh, Myra's on, let's go. Now, I am not going to give it away, but we sat laughing for about 40 minutes. And it was just what we needed to pick us up. And before we had then had to go and do our talks. But I also know you, our other mutual friends, Pink Spaghetti. I know you've just done their conference, Caroline, and all the ladies at Pink Spaghetti. And also, we had the lovely pleasure of working together at Phenomenal Woman a few weeks ago. So, Moira, tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do? Things like that.
Okay, well, thanks for that. I hadn't really described myself previously as a cure for hangover, but that might be my new strapline now. You need every bit of marketing you can get, so thanks for that. Yeah, so my name is Maura Jackson. I am full-time chief exec of a charity called Back Up Northwest, which is a service for young people who are homeless in Bolton. And what we do there is we provide accommodation, flats, bed sits, which are kitted out, furnished, decorated, and the young people move in, and then we have got teams of staff that provide like specialist support around whatever they need to be able to live independently. So the charity itself has been running for 33 years, and I have been the chief exec here for the last 13. I'm just starting the 14th year here. I absolutely love it. And I did work here in the 90s when the organisation was tiny and there were only 5 staff, and I was one of 2 support workers, and we supported 20 young people between us. I did that for 2.5 years. So when the post came up as the chief exec, and I just thought, yeah, that is the job for me. I already know that I love the organisation and that, the mission and everything is absolutely something I can get behind. So that, the rest is history. But as a bit of a side hustle, as you know, Ashley, I've set up a company called the Feather Fixer, which is 2 bits to it really. One is the keynote speaking, which you've mentioned. So keynote speaking around leadership, resilience, just life really. So issues. Sometimes I've done keynote speeches on the menopause. I'm not an expert, but sometimes it's good to talk about stuff that you experience. And yeah, anything around business and charity. I've done loads, spoken loads of different venues for different sort of audiences. And then the other side of the Feather Fixer is stand-up comedian, event host, and sort of generally arsing around. Arsing around and getting paid for its ace. So yeah, the comedian stuff started fairly recently. I'm in my 3rd year of doing that properly, and that's been crazy. Absolutely crazy. But that's what I do. But in the middle of all this, and the thing that kind of caught my eye when you were explaining what you were doing with the resilient kid was actually behind all this. My most important role is as a special guardian to both my grandchildren. So Ruby is 14 and Louis is 7, and they have lived with me for 5.5 years full time. So in the middle of all that, as I approach 50, it would appear that I've gone back to being a full-time parent, which initially was really fucking difficult. But now, we're in a routine, life's good, they're settled, they're safe, everything's okay.
Do you know what? I have met Ruby when you were doing the stand-up at for Manifest that we were talking about before. And she is a cracking young girl. In fact, I think I've met her a couple of times.
Yeah.
She's a typical teen, embarrassed about, what's happening, just leave me alone kind of thing, but really polite, really lovely. And, to think that Because my guess is, Moira, you were getting to a point in your life where things were settling down. You've got a really good job, professionally. You've got this very, successful side hustle as well, where you're being asked to do keynote speeches, stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, you're back to parenting. Like, the bit that you thought was done, your bit was done, and you could just be, nana or grandma, and they just come for visits on Sundays and things like that. Your life must have been upside down.
It was absolutely crazy because it literally was one day. So on a Thursday tea time, I was in a meeting. We had a board meeting here at Backup. My mum texted me and said, I don't know the full story, but Louis is in hospital. He's had an accident, and I'm just going to go and pick them up. I'll let you know when I come out what's gone on. So I thought, shit, what is this? But I thought my mum's there, and she said it was okay. So I finished the meeting, and it finished at 7:30. And then my mum texted about 5 minutes later and said, I'm on my way to your house. I'll explain everything when I get there. So that was fine. So she arrived about half an hour later with the two grandchildren, but not my daughter. And because I was expecting all three of them, and I said, what's happened? Louis had black eyes and sort of bruising on his face and his neck, scratches on his face, his ears, he was 1.5, so his tiny little ears here were black at the top and inside. That they were, I thought, what the hell? Both of them, both his ears. And anyway, my mum just was crying her eyes out. I've only seen her cry twice in my entire life. And she cried her eyes out and just said basically that my daughter had asked her to go and pick the children up and give her a lift. But when she got there, really, it was an absolute shit show. So, long story short, Louis had gone to nursery with some marks on his face, and the nursery staff wondered whether it was meningitis because it was like dots on his face. So they tried to contact my daughter. She didn't answer the phone because she was at work. And so they just got medical advice themselves. And a mobile paramedic came out and said, no, it's not meningitis. However, what it is bruising, and it's just forming, it's new bruising. So obviously they did what they had to do, which was a safeguarding referral. And that led to a trip to A&E. My daughter met them there with her partner, and basically they explained that he'd had a fight the previous day with the partner's son, who was 3. They'd been fighting over toys and had this scrap or whatever. And so basically the people at A&E said, no, this bruising, there's no way has it been caused by a 3-year-old. It's been caused by an adult. So they got to the police, and then my daughter's partner's story, she was looking after the children the previous day, and it just didn't add up. So that led to them saying, look, we're going to just do a bit of an investigation. Can the children stay somewhere else? And of course, I said, yeah. So my mum brought them to me. I went to a meeting the following morning at 9 o'clock to find out what was going on. I had to take the children with me to social services, who basically explained this story and then said, until we're satisfied with the explanation, we're treating it as a non-accidental injury, and can you look after them? Well, like, absolutely. But that then it unfolded into a voluntary arrangement, which my daughter obviously agreed to because she wasn't around when these injuries occurred. She was at work. Her partner had been looking after him. And, then it very quickly became hostile because my daughter believed the partner's explanation and accepted that and defended it to a point. And it got to a stage where she was defending the indefensible and she just didn't see it. So it turned into a 3-week emergency care order, and I was trying to plead with my daughter to say, listen, for God's sake, you've got to engage with social care. This is ridiculous. And so she just shut down then, cut us off. So I was at a point there actually where the children were dropped off. I didn't have any of the clothes. I didn't have school uniforms. I didn't have the car seats. I had nothing. So I had to start that weekend and buy everything, obviously dealing with the emotional side of things. Louis was just, he didn't really know what was going on, and he wasn't able to articulate what had gone on. And when I said to him, oh, what's happened to your face? He just kept saying, hit me, hit me. Well, that's all he could say. So he doesn't remember this. He has no recollection of it, but Ruby does. Not the incident, because she wasn't there. She was at school, but the whole unfolding of the, being lifted out of one house and into another without any explanation, no contact with mum. It was just horrific. And then, social services are saying to me, you know, will you look after them? Well, obviously, of course, I'm going to look after them. They're not going into foster care, not a chance. And I sort of went where I'd always been the professional in the social care arena. I'm the safeguarding lead for our organisation. I've done safeguarding around domestic abuse. I've been on the MARAC panels. I've been involved with criminal justice. I've worked on homicide reviews with the Home Office. I've done all safeguarding from every professional angle you can imagine. And then all of a sudden, I'm the one being scrutinised around whether or not I'm fit to care for my own grandchildren. So that was a 9 hour, it wasn't all done at the same time, but 9 hours of assessment, of asking us questions about our family networks, how we make decisions, how we deal with conflict in the house, what support networks we have, all our background, our finances. It was so intrusive and pretty judgmental. I had to pull them up a few times and say, well, hang on a minute, you can't ask us questions like that. I don't care what you're doing, you know, wind your neck in. And they did. And I had to say to two of the social workers one day, I said, I actually feel sorry for you, because I know that you're strapped for resources and that you've got high caseloads. And I do understand the sector you're looking in. But you also got to deal with me. And you can't bulldoze any bullshit past me. I'm not having it. You're not treating us like this. And so, they were on eggshells for a bit, but they kind of got used to me, and we built up a really great trusting, like, working relationship, because I was, I'm honest as the day is long. I've never been any different. So they knew that they were going to get, what they saw, I suppose, really. And 3 weeks turned into 26 weeks. And then COVID landed in the middle of that. So 26 weeks turned into 74 weeks. And the courts weren't sitting, and meetings were delayed, and contact was done through the window. The social worker couldn't come in the house, and there was all that faff to deal with. But I felt like we'd already been locked down. As a family, we were kind of locked down before lockdown. It was a bizarre situation. So April 21 was the final court hearing. My daughter was still staying with the partner, still defending her. And anyway, they didn't engage with the social care teams all the way through. They had chance after chance after chance. They just didn't do it. And it was proven in court that the injuries were caused by an adult, and that his only contact with an adult on that day was with her, this, my daughter's female partner. And that was all noted in court and everything in a finding of fact hearing. And even that wasn't enough for my daughter to kind of say, I'm out. And so we had to just find a different way of being a family. One of the hardest things, apart from being under scrutiny with social services and the fact that I'm like a social care professional myself, was having to deal with my daughter, who basically cut me off, stopped referring to me as mum. That kind of crept in. I'm not sure when that happened, but that happened. That was heartbreaking. Started to refer to me as Maura in meetings, and then just cut us off. And it's like grieving for somebody that's died, a relationship that's died, but they're still sat in your living room because you've got to facilitate the contact visits because it's the best thing for the children. It was just heartbreaking. Now, she's not with that partner anymore, but it took 3 years for her to kind of get the strength to leave. And it was a very coercive relationship, but I have never been able to compute the decision making behind partner, children. To me, there is no decision to be made, but she didn't make it. She didn't make the right decision. She knows she didn't make the right choices, and she deeply regrets it. So we're in a position now where she has regular contact. I mean, she came for tea on Wednesday night. That's a new thing. So that's quite nice. She's took the children away overnight. They've had little visits to different places, and it's going well. Everything's settled. Everything's calm. We've got a routine going. The kids understand what's what. Louis asked me a question the other week, because he's never really asked why he doesn't live with his mum. He's never questioned it. And he said to me only about a month ago, actually, did I come out of your belly or mum's belly? And I said, mum's belly. And he went, oh, right. Well, why don't I live in mum's house then? And I said, well, your mum had a friend like when you were a baby. I said, and they just were really not very nice. I said, they were quite a dangerous person. I said, so we just decided it was safer for you to live here. I said, but she's not friends with them anymore. But you were settled and happy, so we carried it on. He just went, oh, okay. and that trotted off, playing swing ball or whatever he was doing. He's just very accepting, you know, doesn't get it. Ruby, on the other hand, still struggles because she's never really had an explanation from her mum about why she had to move. She just kept saying, why, I don't understand why Louis has to live with you, but why do I have to? Why can I not stay with mum? Because if they do anything to me, then I can tell you, but Louis couldn't tell you. Because obviously social services explained to her directly about having to be kept safe, and that mum had demonstrated she couldn't do that at that time and stuff like that. So, I mean, she absolutely gets it now, and she knows that she's safer with us and that things are more stable. My daughter still struggles with mental health, but like on a small scale. She's got things in hand. She's working. She's got herself a lovely dog who's absolutely done the world of good for her, and she's building her life back up. And she's doing well, and she's had a couple of relationships that she's ended because they have not treated her well, or the red flags have been there. And I thought, do you know what, you're learning, and it's really great to see that. And she's been open about what's gone on and stuff. So it's just where we are now. So Ruby's obviously at secondary school. She's just starting made her options for next year for GCSEs. She gives me a lot of shit about being a comedian, tells me constantly that I'm not funny. She said, I've heard you practicing, and talking about ex-husbands and swearing is just not funny. And I said, yeah, it is. I said, so okay then, if it's not funny, how am I selling out venues? How am I selling out a theatre with 300 people in, like, on my own? And she said, they feel sorry for you because you work for a charity. I said, right, piss off. Yeah. So, yeah, we have a bit of a love-hate conversation. She is only joking, but she loves having a dig, especially when her mates are in the house. But yeah, life is pretty good actually. But that whole journey, and oh my God, the scrutiny with social services. I had an experience once where they rang me up and said, you're going to have to facilitate contact. There's no staff in the contact centres because of COVID and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, my daughter isn't socially isolated. She was at a party 2 days ago. She put it on Facebook. It's public. I don't really want her coming in the house. I'll meet her outside. We'll meet her on the park or whatever, blah, blah, blah. They said, no, needs to be inside. Weather's not great. Like I said, you cannot force someone to bring someone into their home when Boris is telling us, don't do this. You're going to kill people's grandmas and all that. Because this was in the time where we were getting that really like frightening propaganda and everything, because people didn't know what was going on really. They were making it all up as they went along. And so I just, I ended up really standing my ground, and there was a woman yelling at me saying, you're making this really difficult. And I said, I'm not making it difficult. I haven't invented COVID. She was welcome in the house, but she is not socially isolating. She was at a party, a house party. There's photographs online. I've screenshotted it. I've sent it you. I don't want her coming in. If we get COVID, we're both key workers. And the kids, are still going to school because they were key workers' children and all that. I said, where are we then? I'm not doing it. And you can't force us to do this in our own home. And they were like, well, we're going to have to look at foster care placements. We're like, no, you're not. You're not going to pay £3 a week in foster care placements because I've said no to one contact visit. Grow up. But, it's hard to push back when you're dealing with, proper authority who've got all the control and all the power around what happens to the children. And I thought everything I say is being written up. I don't want to look difficult, or not that I want to engage or anything like that. It wasn't about that. I just thought, hang on, everything's on me here. If I'm ill, what happens to them? And this was still around the time where they were saying, people were dying. Well, people were dying. That wasn't made up. But I just thought, no way am I bringing somebody in who's not socially isolating. I don't care who it is. I know I won that argument, but 3 days of conversation, they tried to bully me into doing it. And the last conversation, I ended up putting the phone down and saying, you're making me ill. I mean, I don't know how else I'm trying not to be dramatic or overly dramatic, but honestly, I was as near to a nervous breakdown that summer as I've ever been in my life. And I just said, you can't do this. And I pushed back. I said no. The day and time of the contact visit passed. It never got mentioned again. And I thought, oh my God, you could have bulldozed me into doing something that was really risky, and you're not even bothered that I've said no. There's been no consequences to it whatsoever.
As a professional, you would have pushed back a lot for the young people that you work with. You know, you've like you say, you've probably done every role, or certainly worked with every role in social care. And then these are your grandkids, but also it's not just your grandkids. And can I just say thank you for sharing that story with us, because that's not, that's not an easy story to tell for anyone at all, let alone grandmom. But what I was thinking is, you've done that, but this is your grandkids that you're fighting for. But actually, it's not obviously it's not against your daughter, but your daughter is on the other side of that as well. So, and I think I'm listening to your story and I'm thinking, thank God you've got, for want of a better word, the balls to push back. Because how do people who haven't, got the professionalism, haven't got the had that working relationship, or what that looks like before we social care, or what's expected, at least you had an insight, and look how hard it was for you. Like, how do you think those families who haven't got that kind of insight, how do they manage?
Well, I think the reality is that they probably get bulldozed over and they will agree to do things that possibly make them feel compromised or ill, which is a worst case scenario, because they feel like they can't say no, they're not allowed to say no, or that they're going to be really badly judged for saying no and standing up for themselves. But I found myself one day in one of the meetings that we're required to attend with social services, and my daughter was present. And my daughter had said to me privately, "You are well in with social services. Just tell them that I'll be fine. I didn't do these injuries. I love the children. Just tell them, and they'll give them me back." And I said, "Will you explain to her that our relationship professionally, like, doesn't do that? That there's no way I got that level of influence because the courts are involved. There's a process. There's a, CAFCAS and the Guardian ad litem and all the rest of it. This is all way bigger than me or backup, and it's nothing to do with work." I had to come into work and declare a conflict officially on record to the Board of Trustees and say, "I am now being assessed as a foster carer, kinship foster carer, to look after my own grandchildren who have, I've had loads of time with." I mean, one of the laughable things was part of the assessment, Ashley, was an 8-page risk assessment on the dog. We've got a dog, right? We've got a Shih Tzu. And because we had animals in the house, we had to do this risk assessment. And I said, "Seriously, what the fuck are you going to do if the dog doesn't pass his risk assessment? You're going to pay £3,000 each for the kids to go into foster." But I'll show you the dog. Look at him. Look at this vicious dog. He's asleep on my desk.
Brilliant. Oh my
Honest to
God.
God. And so we had to fill in this risk assessment, and I just thought it's laughable, this. Some of it is absolutely laughable. We had to get references from people about our parental ability, so that we had to provide references. My husband has no children, so this was a complete first for him. And it was like, weren't we going to get a reference that says people have seen him parenting? I had people who've known me like all my life and stuff, and that was fine. You couldn't have family. And so they asked me, could my ex-husband do a reference because I was part of parenting his daughter? I said, absolutely not. What, you're going to declare what's going on to somebody I haven't spoke to for 15 years? Where's the GDPR there? Are you meant? So there's all this stuff where you kind of pick holes in it and think, well, hang on a minute. If I hadn't said no to that, would they have gone and found him and said, "Oh, we're investigating blah, blah. Can you tell us what kind of parent she is?" No, he would have said they were a good parent. I mean, he's not an idiot and he's not vindictive. But I just thought, I bet there are relationships that have brought down where that would have been a risk, where somebody would have thought, "Oh, I'm going to just, stick the knife in here and say, she were a right bitch," or whatever. And I just thought, but even the confidentiality aspects of it, I don't want him knowing all my bloody business and what's going on with my daughter. So there were loads of things where I just thought, oh, no way. So I did actually put 2 formal complaints in that sort of 74-week window about how they were dealing with the situation and where they were breaching their own procedures. Because I said to them, "You are the gift that keeps on giving here. You're breaching your own procedures and hoping that nobody notices." Well, I'm noticing. And we had a meeting, we had an official meeting in response to one of the complaints. And I said to the 2 managers that I met with, again, I'm totally, in admiration for the job that you do. I wouldn't do it for a gold pig. But notwithstanding, I'm not putting up with this bullshit. And also, I feel quite sorry for you because you have to deal with me and I will not let it go. You will answer for what you've done. And I did say to them in that meeting, it was minuted, if Children's Services partly commission backup where I work, where I'm the chief exec. So I have bid for a contract with them and they partly commission us. And I said to them, if I ran backup in the way that you deliver your services, you would decommission me. You would decommission us and take that contract away. But your practices are appalling. And I'm only one person and I've only been exposed to a couple of people in your teams, and it's a shambles. And it's such a shame because the individuals within it, we had two social workers that I dealt with in particular were absolutely fantastic. Lovely people and really good at the job and really went all out to try and help us. And then a couple of others, they weren't horrible, they're just rushing. You can see they're not interested. They don't really care. Have we seen them? Are the children alive? Stuck their head in the window. Yeah, I'm done now. I'm off. And I thought, bloody hell, I've took half a day off work for this. And on that note, right at the beginning, when it sort of first happened, the other thing that was really very difficult and where I felt I was being bulldozed quite a lot was because Louis had got actual injuries. He had to go and, be seen by medical professionals. So he had to have some x-rays and this, that, and the other. And they rang me one day and I was in the hairdressers. It was our Christmas do lunch so I was in the hairdressers in the morning. He was at nursery and they said, Louis got an appointment today for a full body x-ray at 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock. And I said, I can't do it today. It's a Christmas lunch at work. I'm hosting it. I'm chief exec, blah, blah, blah. Right, well, okay, we'll send somebody up to pick him up from nursery. I said, what, a stranger? And they said, yeah, but, I said, you can't do that. How long does a full body x-ray take? They said about 3 hours. And I said, absolutely not. Are you sending a stranger to pick him up from nursery, take him to the hospital where he was last week in a really stressful environment where his mum was freaking out? I said, absolutely not. Well, then you'll have to do it. And I said, can you not get me an appointment tomorrow or, any other day? No, it's today at 2 o'clock. So I just had to ring work and say, I'm really sorry, somebody else will have to host the lunch, it'll be, and it was fine, but I just felt really bad. I'd let people down. And there's just no, and I said to her, I work full time. I've got commitments and responsibilities and what have you. So after that day, then I spoke to the board of trustees again because I had told them what had gone on, and I had a month off because the appointments, there were no notice whatsoever, and it was paediatrician, x-rays. They had to be seen obviously by social services. We had to have family meetings and then the assessment started. So they were all in December. So the incident happened on the 28th of November. It was Louis' second birthday on the 4th of December. I didn't take any photos because he still had two black eyes, and I thought, I'm not taking any pictures of him today. He looks a mess. And then the whole of December, then I was off work while I sorted out all the practicalities and the logistics of what they needed. And I went back to work in the January. So, I don't know how other people cope, quite frankly, because, I was in a fortunate position that I had the absolute backing of the company that I worked for. The board were totally they were quite happy for me to stay off longer, but I was going nuts. And to be honest, all the kind of appointments had been pretty much dealt with by then. But yeah, December was really difficult. Both the birthdays in December. Ruby's is just before Christmas. So it was very hard to fit all those appointments in, try and let them have great birthdays, be a normal person and not absolutely go mad. It was a horrible, horrible time. But thank God, I've got good people around me and things settled down afterwards. And, 5 years later, it's totally fine. It's fine.
So am I right in thinking you have, is it kinship guardianship for the special guardianship, don't you, for the kids? And that must have been to get that over the line, just a few of the things there where you're not being bullied, but that must take some mental toll, which I want to return to. But also, the procedures, that they're going against GDPR or, it's not, but I just, like everything that I'm listening to, Moira, I'm like, oh my God, this is so unfair. This is their grandma, nana, whatever the kids call you. And You've got their best interests at heart. You've taken them at the drop of a hat. And actually, I think, how is it that we scrutinize? And my mic was off, so I was really laughing. And if you're watching this, you'll see me laughing. But 8 pages for a dog, for the dog. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not being funny. If it was like a massive, vicious dog that was already growling as the social workers come in the door, fair play. But it isn't. But how do we, we're not holding up people, parents, to this scrutiny. And yet those who step in, those, and not just like yourself who are, kin, but those who are foster carers. I mean, I understand the scrutiny, but my goodness, like, can't you just give us a break? Can't I do that appointment tomorrow? It's just so difficult. And we both said before we started this, it's, there's lots of lovely people there who are up against a huge amount of pressure. There's some people who care about what they do, care about the people that they are, and some people who, are just getting on with the job, and they're not connecting with those families. They're not, reaching out and finding out what they can do to support. But it's the system, isn't it? It's the system that's broken, surely. Maura, how did you get it over the line so that you have got that guardianship now?
One of the challenges of the whole situation was throughout that like 2.5 year window, right up, the special guardianship was appointed to us in April 2021, but right up to the previous sort of October, November, there was still language and narrative around, from the social workers saying she's coming along. There might be a chance that the children get to go back, but it would be a very slow, incremental process, to facilitate that. And I thought, well, they've been with us 2 years, so okay, I mean, it was out of our hands at that time, and I never ever said, absolutely they cannot go back. I think we were always hoping that she would somehow very quickly say, oh my God, what a nightmare, need to bin that partner off and I want the children back, and what do I need to do? So in the October, we had a meeting, and they were saying, actually, she's turned a corner, the relationship's ended, she's done this, that, and the other, and we're gonna have a look at it and see whether it's feasible. So me and my husband were like, bloody hell, this might actually end up, reversing at some point, slowly, but God, like, who thought that sort of thing? I think we'd resigned ourselves to the fact that we were going to be keeping them. But they asked us, would you be willing to have them permanently if that was the recommendation? Like, of course, of course. So this went on till about the January, and then in the January, we were told, actually, no, that is not the case. We are going to be recommending that you two are given special guardianship. No explanation. Now, the other thing that I've not mentioned up to now that is particularly difficult for kinship foster carers is that you are not party to court proceedings. Grandparents, particularly, are not allowed in court. So you are doing all the work. You are taking all the impact of looking after a child or children, yet your only involvement in the court process is fed to you from a social worker who may or may not remember to ring you and pass on what's gone on and what decisions have been made the same day, the next day, a week later. So that is incredibly difficult. And we were always kept on the outside because you're not party to proceedings. So the information around our assessments and all the meetings that we'd had and any conversations are all fed back in reports to the judge to obviously make decisions about the children. But both the children's fathers are privy to that information about us, but we're not allowed in. So now Ruby's dad, great guy, really nice man, still around, very supportive, doesn't live locally, but manages it really well. They have a really good relationship. He's really good with us, and vice versa. Everything's good. He has had to give consent for Ruby to live with us, but he wanted. And he has also agreed that should anything happen to me, he will take both children. It's a nice man. He's getting married next year. We're going to his wedding, so it's fantastic. He's a lovely person. Louis' dad, complete and utter wanker, in and out of prison, absolute fucking pillock. I mean, he's a knob of the highest order. Oh, fucking, he's a dick. And so it just burned me thinking he's getting options around, and he will by law have to be sort of asked, do you want to apply for parental responsibility? Do you want this? It was given our address. I just think this is wrong. You know, it's wrong that this gobshite who I don't want any contact with, um, and who is not permitted to see the other two children he had with another woman. He's not allowed. He's such a tit. And no, he can't have any contact with Louis either. That's been prohibited. But I push for that. You know, because the system is shot at. It isn't fit for purpose. So people like us in that position of kinship foster caring are excluded. And it's only because I would ring literally the same day and say, what happened? What's next? What's next? You know, what was the outcome? Even if it was like, well, it's been adjourned, or they're doing some more reports, or there's, you know, they're waiting for whatever. It was like, right, well, you know, and then sometimes they'd ring and give me a piece of information. Like, when were you going to tell us? You know, this actually matters to what we're doing. This is, we're the ones that are taking all the impact and all the brunt of what's going on. And then also having to find a way to communicate that to Ruby and sort of let her know what was happening and in an appropriate way, and make sure that they were both still okay and everything, as well as just practical life, and both keeping down a full-time job. And fucking COVID, it honestly, it was mental. It was the most mental. If I ever questioned, not that I have, that I was not resilient, that, you know, I would say now my resilience is overflowing, because whatever I get thrown at now at work or whatever, I mean, work's stressful and I deal with like life and death situations frequently, really difficult situations, really challenging. And I just think everything I can handle anything. I can deal with anything, me. And I always have been able to do professionally, but this was different because it was so personal. And so when it got to the stage where they were saying, right, we are going to make that recommendation, well, the attitude of social services towards us totally changed. We became the saviours. We became best mates. Oh, they couldn't do enough for us. They were throwing money at us. What can we do? What do you need? Do you need new furniture? Do you need, no, we're all sorted now, thank you. You know, and it just, yeah. But they, right at the end, then, at the end of the process, when it was agreed, there's then a conversation to be had where you agree a financial package for you to continue to be a special guardian, like a foster care in allowance type thing, to contribute to living costs and stuff like that. And so they came back to me and said, would you want one, or are you just going to pay for it all? I'm like, yes, I want a financial package. Don't take the piss. And then I had consulted with a solicitor. I'd had a paid 300 quid to have this consultation, who were superb and explained what we could and couldn't ask for, and what sort of levels they were, and how long that could last for, and stuff like that. And when they came to me and made an offer, and they said, oh, we're not going to pay nursery fees anymore, we're not going to pay this, because they'd paid that throughout the time that they were on the care order. So I said, yeah, you are. Yeah, you are paying nursery fees until he's 4. Even if he wasn't in a kinship place, he'd get 33 hours. So yeah, you are. And so I went back and I just said, I've seen a solicitor, and actually you've got to pay for that. You've got to pay for me to get legal advice. You know this. I'm entitled to independent advice. And they hadn't mentioned it. And I thought, don't start. We're nearly at the end of this. Don't push your luck. And it just sort of went on, and I went back, and anyway, then they offered an amount of money, and I just thought, this is less. This is less than what we're getting before. You know, you can't do that. So I just went back, put an appeal in, was pretty forthright. You know, I can put together a mean, you know, document me. I know what I'm doing. I'd got all the legal facts correct, and then I went back and I got the financial package that I asked for. So I just thought, fuck off, you know, fuck off.
Do you know what, Moira? I was just thinking about then when you were saying it first, you know, Louis's dad having access to information about you and you not having it, and you actually have the kids. You know, stuff like that, that's so unfair. And when we say not fit for purpose, it's a broken system, isn't it? It's completely broken. But also, as well, I think it's very easy to be Oh, well, you're grandma, so why would you not just have the kids? Why do you need the money? You're their grandma. Hold on a minute. This is two professional, this is a professional couple who've done, you've done your parenting bit and they've left the house and you're getting on with your own life and looking, my guess is looking, the money that's coming in the pot is for holidays and retirement and all that. And then all of a sudden you've got two very expensive, because we know how expensive kids are, and yes, does that mean that you don't love them? Of course not. You talk about the drop of the hat. They asked you, do you want, if it came down to it, would you take them permanently? And bearing in mind, your husband hasn't had kids, so he just thought, my guess is, and obviously I've never met Mr. Jackson, but my guess is that he was like more than happy to have the grandkids round at a weekend and stuff. But actually, this is it's a very full time, and especially when they're quite small. You now got Ruby who's a teen, with all what that brings. And actually, I think sometimes people don't realise the monetary side, and actually what the pressure that can take off you as a couple if they are. And actually, they should be providing it. I know a few foster carers, and actually, they've, their kids call them mum and dad. They are here for the long haul, and they often get asked, why do you not adopt? Why are you not just taking these kids in? And I said, because everything stops, everything. We would have, like, it's not like if you've planned to have a baby. It's not like if you've planned this. This is often dropped in. And actually, the finances just take a bit of pressure off, don't they? Take a bit of pressure off. Before we finish, I wanted to ask you about how did you get through this? Because what I know of you, you're a real strong woman, and we know that you don't take any crap, that you will push back. But as we've already said, you're probably in a kind of an episode of your life where you thought everything was settled and you were just, you were cracking on with a career, you've got a lovely husband, all that. And then this happens. How did you get through it mentally, having to fight and constantly fight? How did you get through it mentally?
Well, there were sort of three stages really. So initially, I was just going day to day. I don't think I was getting through it. I think I was just focused on the logistics of life and what I needed to do at work, at home, just to make sure that all responsibilities were met. Now, they moved in the November, right at the end, and then by the following August, it was fever pitch time. This was the time where we're arguing about contact and COVID and all the rest of it. And in that August, the lockdowns were just lifted. And my sister, who lives in Essex, came up for the first visit that she could have done, like since the initial lockdown in March. And she came up and she just looked at me and said, what is happening? I said, what? And she said, well, obviously I know what's going on. And, she knew the whole picture and everything, but she just took one look at me and said, have you seen a doctor? And I said, no, why would it? And she said, I don't think you look well. And I thought, why? And I thought, well, I'm a bit knackered or what, that type of thing. But I looked, when I remember back to that time, she arrived. I'd not had a shower for 3 days, which that never happens. I looked like dog shit. And I was trying to make breakfast because she'd arrived early in the morning. And she was talking to my mum was there at the same time. And I just thought, I can't bear. I don't want to talk. So I just sat there in silence and she said, you need to see somebody. And then so she said, I'll come with you to see the doctor. I said, what for? What's the doctor going to do? And she said, well, I don't know, but like, get antidepressants or something. I said, I'm not going on antidepressants. Like, they'll take the fucking children off me. I'm not doing that. So on the Monday, she was pecking me head, like, because she's gone back then. And then she's, ring the doctor, ring the doctor. So I'm not ringing the doctor. And on the Monday, I think I was just I were a bit frazzled. I were really frazzled. And I went into the dining room and looked at the wallpaper on the dining room wall and thought, I fucking hate that wallpaper. I've always hated it. So I started chipping it off, but I didn't have anything to take it off with because, of course, I'd not thought this through. Then I was getting bits of paper and plaster all over my clothes. So I just took all my clothes off and used a butter knife to pull off the wallpaper. And then while I was doing that, the phone rang and it was the doctor. And I burst into tears, and the doctor said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just trying to scrape all the wallpaper off the wall. I'm naked and I'm using a butter knife." The doctor said, "Can you please put the knife down and sit down? I need to talk to you. Your sister's rang." So, like, okay. So I talked to the doctor, and then I went in about an hour later. The doctor was only in the corner, and I got antidepressants. And I also then, they were talking about counselling, but the waiting list for, like, 5 months or whatever. So I just rang up and arranged to see a counsellor that I knew through work. And I started counselling that same week. So, in terms of the question, how did you cope mentally? I weren't coping. That was not coping. I cried all the time, cried every day. I hadn't realised that had become a thing until I started talking to the counsellor. But I thought I've cried every day for about 4 months. Yeah, that was just the worst time in my life, and I've dealt with worse shit than this, let me tell you. But the impact was awful. So then, when I started to look after myself, the antidepressants really helped. I took them for about a year and a half. The other thing that I didn't do well in terms of not looking after myself and lockdown and all the rest of it is I put 5 stone on. So over a 2-year period, I put 5 stone on. So that was really not good. That had a damaging impact on my mental health and health in general. That wasn't good. So it was just eating my way through the problem. But then when I kind of, things started to settle, or at least we knew that this was the new normal, or, whatever terminology we're using, it was then about, right, I'm going back to the things that I know work for me. So reflexology, spending time with friends. But I mean, we're in the middle of lockdown, so you can't be around people. So I had to sort of put things in place where I was FaceTiming people. I joined a couple of groups on Facebook, so there were like quizzes and stuff like that. And then I started to practice the stand-up comedy because somebody had asked me about doing it, and I'd said absolutely not. No, no, not for me. The thought of it. See, when I speak, I'm quite funny. People laugh, and that's lovely. But then when somebody was asking me to perhaps try stand-up comedy, I thought, actually, there's a difference between being funny and that being a lovely byproduct. But then to say to people, I am funny and I'm going to guarantee that I'm going to make you laugh and I'm going to charge you money for the privilege. And I thought, that's a step I'm not prepared to take. That's too much pressure. But I saw an advert on Facebook for a competition for people that were brand new to comedy, never tried it before, to give it a go. And it was a little competition with a 5-minute set. And I thought, all right, then I'll do it. But I was absolutely wired because I've been taking loads of medication because I actually had COVID when I saw this advert. I was in bed poorly. So 3 days later, when I kind of come round and felt better, and I got an email off this bloke saying, right, you're on the list. It's in 4 weeks' time. I thought, oh no, not a chance. So I rang him up. I said, listen, love, I've made a mistake. I were up to my eyeballs on cocodamol. I'm just no. So we had a chat on the phone, and he was sort of asking, well, what made you click it in the first place? There must have been something. There must be some basis to it. So I told him, I've hosted events for the charity and, blah, blah, and done that for a long time, public speaking. Anyway, he then said the thing that I just thought, you twat, you've just emotionally blackmailed me into saying yes, which was, there are no other women on this lineup. You would be making a mark for women in comedy. Women are always underrepresented. And I just thought, oh, fucking hell, I'm going to have to say yes. So I said yes, and that's what I did. So I did the competition 4 weeks later. I'd been pacing up in my bedroom, practicing my set for 4 weeks. It was really terrible. But I won. I won the competition. And it was only little. There was 12 of us in the competition, about 40 people in the audience. It was really lovely in a really nice bar in Bolton. And I was just absolutely buzzing. And what I had a taste of then that I've built on and I love is total escapism from everything, from the children, from work, from me, everything. Because when you're writing and crafting your material to be on stage and you're practicing and you're rehearsing, and then when you're actually delivering it, you can't really think about anything else. You've got to concentrate. And then I got beyond that escapism was the joy. And it made me realise that I had not felt joy for such a long time, like none. And somebody asked me, it was actually on a webinar, and they said, where's the joy in your life? And I thought, what makes you laugh? And honestly, I couldn't answer. I didn't have an answer, and I thought, oh my God, I hope she didn't ask me. I don't know what I'm going to say. And I thought, this is awful. I've got 2 grandchildren that I adore, and I couldn't even pick them. because I thought everything around it is so stressful at the moment. I couldn't even find the joy in that situation. That took about 2 years because I resented the life that I was living. I resented that I didn't have that life that you described before, where I was thinking, oh, we've got an holiday booked and I'm out on the lash this weekend and I'm weekend away with the dogs the weekend after and all that. That had just all gone. So really, I didn't resent them. I resented living a life that I had not chosen, that I did not want actually. And that it might be 2 or 3 years, and then all of a sudden one day I just thought that feeling's not there anymore. That resentment's gone now. But it took fucking ages that, and the comedy absolutely helped with that. And now I'm actually earning money. I'm declaring tax. It's all legal and everything, but it's Ruby calls it my funny money. So she likes the funny money. She doesn't like the fact that I'm funny, but she likes the funny money because it's paying for our holidays. But yeah,
Brilliant.
so that's how I've got through it really. And you know, there is that driver and that motivation around the children aren't going back to that situation because I know that Muppet's still living in that house. So that ain't happening, not on my watch. So, that's a driver because you just think, I don't care how shit I feel or how suffocated I feel or whatever with the circumstances. It's all has to be about them. And so that, does keep you focused a lot. So that kept me going until the balance tipped into, my self-care was kicking in. I was back to sort of a more normal, like rational human being. Because in the middle of all this, Ashley, the fucking menopause arrived. And honest to God, when you just think, oh my God, are you fucking joking? I've now got bloody dry everything. Everything's dried up and dropped off. You know, hot sweats, night sweats, hot flushes, migraines. Oh, I thought, but there was a period of time where I thought it was stress.
Mm.
So some of those symptoms I associated to the situation just thought it's stress, it'll pass. And then it was only when the antidepressants kicked in and it was like, actually no, this is different. So yeah, perimenopause was on its way.
Yeah, and that's never a welcome friend, is it? Do you know what I mean? Never. But do you know what? I could sit and listen to you all day, and it's been really lovely because I've known you kind of professionally, and I've known you as somebody sat absolutely laughing, crying at one of your stand-up routines and stuff. And please take this in the right way. It's heartwarming to know that we all struggle because I think sometimes when people see us, and they see us like whether we're talking on stage or in a professional capacity, they think, God, she's got her crap together. And actually, we haven't always, yes, we have for you in this moment because we can do that. But actually, there is behind the scenes, there is stuff still going on. I remember being at an event, and it was my event, I was hosting it, and I had somebody come up to my daughter and, typical teen. And this person said, do you ever struggle with anxiety? And everything in me, now, if I'd have overheard that, it'd probably been a bit of a different matter because I'm very chill. But like you, don't push me because I will push back with twice as much force. And I actually remember thinking, how dare you? How dare you look at her because her mom is a psychotherapist and she, treats all these kids. How dare you ask that of her? And I remember being really, really cross. And then afterwards, I kind of calmed down a little bit and came off my, you know, stool and thought, actually, that's because the perception is that we have all our shit together. And actually, we haven't always, but you know what? We'll get through it. We always do. We always will. It'll be hard. I can't say that I've been naked trying to strip the wall with a butter knife, right? And I was trying to not laugh because, Maura, you say it in such a funny way, but actually, for you to get to that point where you kind of even can't think about what you're doing. You're just doing it. You're just going through the motions of, I don't like that wallpaper. I'm going to sort it right now. And I don't want to get my clothes dirty. I'm going to be stood naked. And thank God the doctor rang when he did. Do you know what I mean? My dad had a couple of nervous breakdowns. And actually, that's why I do the job I do today. So I know how hard that was. But equally, you say it with such fun. And we can laugh because you are through it now. But that kind of leads me on to my last question. Everything that you've been through in your life, which is huge. And we've only had a snapshot today. And you know, you are a powerhouse. And if you ever hear Myra on the stage, whether she's doing comedy or whether she's doing a keynote or she's coming doing training in your company, she is a powerhouse without a doubt, right? But everything that you've been through, what advice would you give your younger self?
That is the $1,000,000 question, isn't it? What advice would you give your younger self? And I think the advice, there's probably two things that stand out for me in life. One is trust your gut instinct all the time. I think I would have benefited from knowing what the gut instinct really meant, and that it isn't just like feminine intuition or whatever. It's a real physiological response to danger and risk, and it's real. So I don't know any situation that I haven't sort of felt uneasy, or where you get that this doesn't sit right, that has not then proved to be exactly what I thought it was. And I'm pretty good at that. If I've got a sense about it, I just think, nah, I ain't doing it. I've always been confident enough to sort of, nip that in the bud. So trust your gut instinct, because it's right and it's there to protect you. And even if it makes you look unpopular, you really need to listen to your gut instinct is the first thing. The second thing is that, and you sort of alluded to this just then, and that is everything passes. Everything passes, good, bad, and ugly. So whatever rut you might be stuck in, or any kind of negativity of any description, like emotionally, practically, whatever, it will pass. You just have to give it time and work your way out of it, and find the resources, whether that's advice, support, time, whatever it is, to assist it. You have to be proactive, but everything will pass. There is, a light at the end of every tunnel, and it sounds a bit cheesy and twee, but it really is true. And I try and say this now to Ruby, if you're feeling miserable, or fell out with one of your mates or whatever, because these are the things that cause, the most drama. It'll pass. It always does. You just need to keep looking forward, keep looking forward. Only look back to see how far you've come and how well you've done. Don't bother with anything else. It's just not worth your time. And just some of the stuff that I do in the leadership training, when I do the invincible leadership stuff, is a bit about that. I've got a whole thing about red flags in leadership that help. And one of them is about guilt. And I don't do guilt. I do not do guilt. I just think it's the most useless emotion. Unless you're a sociopath or a fucking serial killer, it really isn't serving any purpose. I think that it's just, if you've done something and you regret it, or you think it were bad or whatever, sort it out. Sort it out. Either make it right, make amends, or just don't fucking do it again. Don't be a dick. But don't sit around dwelling and festering in your own guilt, because it's done. You can't undo it. You can either sort it, fix it, make it right, make up for it, whatever, or learn from it. But there's no point feeling guilty. All that will do is just chew away at your self-esteem and your self-respect, and you're absolutely no bloody use to anybody then, least of all yourself.
I
So
love
let it go.
I love
Like Elsa, let it go, let it go. Yeah, let
she
it
sings
go.
as well.
Yeah.
Love it. Oh, Myra, thank you so much for joining us today. I do really appreciate it. I love how honest you've been, and I'm really grateful for that, because I know there's other people out there that are really struggling at the moment, whether it is because they've got, something around custody, whether it is that they're going through a hard time, yeah, and we've had a laugh on the way, and I love that. Thank you so much.
I will say something. The foster care social worker told my mum, actually, because my mum was very upset throughout this whole situation, very, very upset, and said to my mum, you wouldn't believe how many families are affected by situations like this. You are really not in isolation. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. And she said there are so many families hanging on to routines by their fingernails. And it's only a tiny thing then that makes the wheels come off, and then we become involved. And you've kept this family together for a long time. You've been supporting your daughter before this and compensating for things which we knew we had. But And that is the thing that I think, you know what, that is what I've seen. I knew that through work because obviously I pick up the brunt end of other family breakdowns and conflicts through young people ending up being homeless. But as I've been open about this story, so many people, like, we employ 90 people at Backup. 7 of us have got someone else's children living in our house. That's a high percentage, I think, for a small organisation. And I think it is quite common. So people are struggling. And that's the ones that are doing it formally, who are getting support. You know, what about those that are just doing it informally? Because they just know, you know, cousin, auntie, sister, brother, whatever needs help and they can come and stay with me.
Yeah.
It's
100%.
very, very common. Very common.
And sometimes that might be only on a temporary basis. I remember a cousin coming to stay with us because, mum just couldn't cope anymore. And whether that was because she didn't have the capacity or, and he'd been a bit of a bugger up the back, to be fair, but he came to us for 6 months. And actually, in those 6 months, he turned his life around and he got the support he needed. And then he went back home. But,
Mm.
my mum did that at the drop of a hat. She just did that because it wasn't just that her nephew needed it, but so did her sister need it.
Yeah.
And I think we don't realize how many people are doing that. And that was for 6 months out of our lives, not for the rest of their life. So yeah, I think it's really common and we don't realize it. Maura Jackson, thank you so much. Every time I speak to you, I always have like Mrs. Jackson song running through my head. But no, seriously, thank you. I have loved our conversation today, and there is so many golden nuggets there that people can take away. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Take care. Thank you for listening. You know where to catch us. Check out Moira, the Feather Fixer. We'll put all the links to her socials and stuff underneath. If you want her on a stage near you, whether it's a keynote speaker at a big conference or whether you want her to come and make your board laugh, or you might want leadership training. However, she does all of that, but you can also support Backup in Bolton. Please, please check out all the links underneath and show your support.